Good afternoon. I'm going to be talking to you about the Mohawks of Akwesasne and their class action lawsuit against the Canada Border Service. The Mohawks of Akwesasne, Ontario feel that they are facing discrimination at the Cornwall-Ontario border crossing and are considering a class action lawsuit against the Canada government. The Indigenous group are being forced to go through security checkpoints to access Canada. As you can see here, the Akwesasne region is unique in that it is the only port of entry where Canadian citizens are required to pass a checkpoint even though they aren't arriving from a foreign country. Akwesasne borders the United States and the Canada border, but it is within the province of Ontario. Some of the effects of colonialism on the issue are the Jade Treaty, the Constitution Act, and the Two-Row Wampum Belt, which we will discuss further in the coming pages. To give you a bit of background on the Mohawks, they are one of the original members who make up the Six Nations of Confederacy. They've also been called some of the most stubborn. In the 1700s, the Mohawks occupied land closer to Montreal, but moved to the St. region of Akwesasne due to overcrowding in Montreal. The land the Mohawks reside on is unique in that it's a multi-jurisdictional location. As mentioned before, it straddles the Ontario, Quebec, and US border. Looking at the legal historical context of the Mohawk class action lawsuit against the CBSA officers, we need to take into consideration the Two-Row Wampum Belt that happened in 1613. It governs the people of Akwesasne. It is described as two rows. One row is what they say is a ship with our white brothers' ways. The other is a canoe with our ways. The idea is that each will travel down the river of life side by side. Neither will attempt to steer the other's vessel. We must also look at Treaty 57, which is also known as the St. Regis Purchase. It was signed in June of 1847. Representatives of the Crown and certain Mohawks people signed the treaty. The treaty was considered a surrender of land to the Crown, but it was sold in trust for the use and benefit of the Mohawks. Furthermore, we must look at the Jade Treaty, which was signed in 1794. It was an agreement between the United States and Britain. The treaty states that it would allow First Nations people to live on either side of the border and cross the border crossings at their leisure. The United States has upheld the treaty, whereas Canada has never formally recognized it. It is not considered an inherent right of First Nations in Canada. The current legal issues surrounding the class action lawsuit looks towards the Customs Act, specifically Section 99, where it says that CBSA officers have the right to search foreign vehicles arriving at the Canada border. But what happens when the driver of the vehicle is a domestic traveler, such as the Mohawks of Akwesasne? That's the biggest question the residents are asking. Section 8 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom states that unlawful searches of domestic travelers will not be permitted. Akwesasne residents are not foreign travelers crossing the Cornwall border. As you recall, Akwesasne is part of Ontario, as is Cornwall, and therefore they should be exempt from the searches in accordance with Section 8. But this is not happening. We must also look at Section 35 of the Constitution Act, which provides protection to Aboriginals. The Act recognizes and affirms existing treaties of the Aboriginal people of Canada. The CBSA crossing in Cornwall is infringing on the treaty rights of Mohawk people and is creating a sense of isolation, not the reconciliation that we've been striving for. Even further includes Bill C-21. It came into force July 2019. It poses yet another restriction for the Mohawks of Akwesasne. The bill allows for collection of personal information from Aboriginals crossing the border. The bill could cause confusion in the sense that an Aboriginal may be logged as leaving the country by one CBSA officer, but their re-entry into the country may not be recorded by the next officer. The bill also goes against Aboriginals' rights to freely cross the border. Given the current context, I have included 4 suggested ways forward. 1. Ratification by Canada of the Jade Treaty. Also, altering the Canadian passport to include a page of identification for individuals who are Aboriginal. Furthermore, cultural awareness programs for CBSA officers so that they can be more sensitive with the Aboriginals who are crossing the ports of entry. Also, perhaps an identified lane for Aboriginals at Canadian port of entries would help subside some of the current issues the Mohawks are facing. Thank you for listening.